In the shadow of history, a disaster unfolded, eclipsing the world in sorrow. World War I, a conflict so devastating, it reshaped the structure of nations. Imagine, as the dawn broke over Europe, a generation stepped into the abyss, not knowing that over 17 million souls would be consumed by the insatiable appetite of war. The numbers are staggering, the loss immeasurable. This isn't just a tale of battles fought and territories won. It's a haunting legacy of lives extinguished. Get your popcorn, peanuts, grab a beer, and watch this heart-wrenching story of how the war to end all wars forever altered humanity. Witness the shocking truth behind the death toll and its unforgettable impact on the world. World War I was crazy, bro.
But the winds of war blew in, turning joy to despair, leaving scars on every page forever, etched with care. Oh, the echoes in the silence, they wail and cry for the souls lost in the darkness we can't deny, for every tear that's falling.
As the screen fades from black, a solemn whisper carries through the air, a prelude to the unveiling of one of history's darkest chapters. World War I was a crime against civilization, a statement bold, controversial, yet underpinned by the harrowing echoes of the past. Today, we journey back over a century, not just to recount tales of battlefields drenched in blood and tears, but to confront an uncomfortable truth that haunts the annals of history. In the heart of Europe, a spark in 1914 ignited a conflagration that would engulf the world, drawing in nations from every continent into a whirlwind of destruction. It was a war of unprecedented scale and savagery, introducing the world to the horrors of trench warfare, chemical weapons, and mass casualties on a scale never before imagined. Beneath the cacophony of gunfire and the screams of the wounded, the very notion of civilization teetered on the brink of abyss. But why call it a crime against civilization? To understand, we must explore the morass of political intrigue, imperial ambitions, and a tangled web of alliances that transformed a regional conflict into a global catastrophe. We explore how leaders and empires driven by greed and the lust for power orchestrated a conflict that would decimate a generation and reshape the geopolitical landscape of the 20th century. As the narrative unfolds, we reveal the human cost of this tragedy. Beyond the staggering death toll, the war inflicted deep psychological scars, gave rise to totalitarian regimes, and sowed the seeds for even greater conflicts. The aftermath of the war saw the map of Europe redrawn, empires dismantled, and the League of Nations established in a futile attempt to safeguard a peace that would prove to be all too fragile. This is not just a historical recounting. It's an indictment of the failures of humanity to preserve peace and the consequences of those failures. This video aims to shed light on the importance of remembering the lessons of the past, to understand the true cost of war, not just in terms of human lives, but in the loss of potential for a more just and peaceful world. As we navigate through this grim chapter of history, let us question, reflect, and learn. For in the depths of despair, there lies a beacon of hope. The hope that by confronting the sins of the past, we might pave the way for a future where such atrocities are never repeated. Join us on this solemn journey as we unravel a story not just of war, but of humanity's enduring quest for redemption and peace. In the history of human conflict, World War I emerges not merely as a catastrophe of death and destruction, but as an unparalleled crime against civilization itself. This assertion stems from a confluence of factors, each more damning than the last, that when woven together narrate a tale of humanity's descent into a hitherto unimaginable abyss. The dawn of mechanized warfare. The Great War introduced the world to the horrors of mechanized warfare. Tanks churned through the mud of no man's land, while the skies, once the realm of birds and dreams, were commandeered by machines of death. Yet it was the advent of chemical weapons that marked the war's most sinister innovation. Chlorine and mustard gas choked, blinded, and burnt flesh, leaving survivors scarred for life, both physically and mentally. This indiscriminate suffering of combatants and civilians alike challenged the very essence of international laws of war, painting a grotesque portrait of technological progress. The scale of destruction. Never before had the world witnessed destruction on such a scale. Entire landscapes were reshaped by shell fire, villages erased, and cities reduced to rubble. The Western Front, a scar across Europe, bore testament to the relentless assault on the land and its people. This conflict consumed not just soldiers, but entire societies, dragging civilians into the depths of war through starvation, disease, and displacement. The war's death toll, staggering in its own right, tells only a part of the story. The wounded, the shell-shocked, and the bereaved numbered in the millions more, embodying a legacy of loss and suffering. Political and moral failures. At the heart of this cataclysm lay a web of political intrigues, secret alliances, and imperial ambitions. The war's architects, ensconced in their palaces and government offices, seemed all too willing to sacrifice legions on the altars of national pride and territorial gain. This era was marked by a failure of diplomacy, a collapse of moral leadership, and a disregard for the value of human life that bordered on the criminal. The Treaty of Versailles, far from healing the wounds of war, sowed the seeds of resentment and division, laying the groundwork for future conflicts. The war's end did little to resolve the underlying tensions that had led to its outbreak. Instead, Europe emerged from the conflict shattered, its empires crumbling, and its populations grieving. The League of Nations, conceived as a means to prevent future wars, was hamstrung by its own inadequacies and the refusal of key nations to participate. Meanwhile, the punitive peace imposed on Germany fostered a sense of injustice and economic hardship that would eventually fuel the rise of fascism. In presenting World War I as an enemy against civilization, we are compelled to confront not only the immediate horrors of the conflict, but also its lasting impact on the global psyche. This was a war that erased the boundaries between the front lines and the home front, that introduced the world to the concept of total war, and that demonstrated with terrifying clarity the capacity for industrialized societies to wage war on an unrivaled scale. As we analyze the reasons behind this grim designation, let us remember that the true crime lies not only in the act of war itself, but in the failure to learn from its lessons. In the shadows of the Great War, we find a cautionary tale of what happens when the machinery of war eclipses the pursuit of peace, when political ambitions override humanity, and when the world forgets the value of every human life. As the guns fell silent and the smoke cleared, the world awoke to a landscape irrevocably scarred by the brutality of World War I. The conflict's end marked the beginning of a period of profound transformation, a reckoning with the immense human, cultural, and geopolitical consequences that would forever alter the course of history. The Lost Generation. In the aftermath of the Great War, societies across Europe and beyond mourned the loss of an entire generation. Millions of young men had been sent to the trenches only to never return, their dreams and potential extinguished in the mud and barbed wire of no man's land. This void echoed through families and communities, leaving a palpable sense of disillusionment and grief. The war survivors, meanwhile, carried with them not only physical scars but psychological ones, struggling to reintegrate into societies that could scarcely comprehend the horrors they had endured. Literature, art, and poetry of the era reflect this sense of despair and loss, giving voice to a generation for whom the world had lost its innocence. Cultural repercussions. The impact of World War I on culture was profound and far-reaching. Avant-garde movements like Dadaism and Surrealism emerged as direct responses to the war, challenging traditional aesthetics and societal norms in an attempt to make sense of the senseless carnage. The war accelerated changes in gender roles as women took on roles previously reserved for men, contributing to the workforce and the war effort. This shift began to erode the rigid structures of pre-war society, paving the way for the eventual struggle for women's suffrage and greater equality. Geopolitical upheaval. On the global stage, the map of Europe was redrawn by the Treaty of Versailles. which sought to punish Germany and its allies for their role in the conflict. New nations were born from the ashes of empires, and old ones were dismantled or reshaped, leading to a complex collage of nationalities and ethnicities, often sowing the seeds of future conflicts. The treaty imposed harsh reparations on Germany, crippling its economy and fostering a sense of humiliation and resentment that would later fuel the rise of Adolf Hitler and the horrors of World War II. The Treaty of Versailles. The Treaty of Versailles stands as a monumental testament to the failures of post-war diplomacy. Intended to secure peace, the treaty instead became a symbol of vengeance and short-sightedness. Its punitive measures not only failed to rebuild a shattered Europe, but also created a breeding ground for extremism and totalitarian ideologies. The League of Nations, established by the treaty to prevent future conflicts, proved ineffective, its noble ideals undermined by political realities and the absence of key powers like the United States. Shifting power dynamics. The war significantly altered the balance of power globally. The British and French empires, despite emerging on the victorious side, were weakened economically and militarily, setting the stage for decolonization movements across Asia and Africa. The United States, relatively unscathed by the war, rose to prominence as a global economic power, beginning its ascent to superpower status. Meanwhile, the Russian Empire's collapse led to the rise of the Soviet Union, setting the stage for the ideological conflicts of the 20th century. As investigate the sweeping consequences of World War I, it becomes clear that the conflict was not merely a tragic interlude in history, but a pivotal moment that reshaped every aspect of human life. Society, culture, and geopolitics were all irrevocably altered in the war's wake, with the echoes of its devastation reverberating through the decades. The legacy of the Great War serves as a somber reminder of the cost of conflict and the enduring importance of striving for peace. In the shadows of the past, we find not only lessons about the fragility of civilization, but also the resilience of the human spirit, ever capable of rebuilding in the face of unimaginable loss. In the heart of this historical tempest, a singular chilling narrative emerges, casting a shadow long enough to eclipse the myriad tales of valor and horror alike. This is the story of the trenches, a grim, unyielding testament to the suffering of soldiers, an ordeal so harrowing that it serves as the very embodiment of why World War I is condemned as a crime against civilization. Imagine, if you will, the trenches, a labyrinthine network of mud-soaked corridors carved into the very flesh of the earth. Here, in this desolate underworld, men from diverse corners of the globe were thrust into the maw of mechanized death. Day and night, the air was rent with the screams of the wounded and the dying, while artillery shells transformed no man's land into a moonscape of desolation. The conditions in the trenches were beyond the pale of human endurance. Men lived side by side with rats, fought lice on their bodies, and struggled against the pervasive mud that sought to claim both the living and the dead. The smell of decay permeated everything, a constant reminder of the omnipresent specter of death. This was a world where soldiers, many no older than boys, were subjected to the unrelenting horror of gas attacks, where the air they breathed could become a fiery torrent, scorching lungs and searing skin. But perhaps the most profound atrocity lay in the psychological torment. The relentless bombardment, the uncertainty of survival, and the witnessing of comrades' deaths day after day inflicted wounds on the psyche that were as debilitating as any physical injury. Shell shock, as it came to be known, left countless souls trapped in a limbo of trauma, their minds forever scarred by the horrors of trench warfare. This prolonged exposure to the abyss, where humanity stumbled on the brink of annihilation, speaks volumes of the war's designation as a crime against civilization. The trench experience shattered pre-war notions of honor and glory in combat, revealing instead a grim tableau of human suffering and the futility of war. Yet, the suffering of the soldiers in the trenches was but a prelude to the broader consequences that would unfold in the war's aftermath. The physical and psychological scars borne by returning veterans sowed the seeds of discontent and disillusionment, creating fertile ground for the rise of totalitarian regimes. leaders exploiting the grievances of the war-weary populace rose to power, promising to restore pride and rectify the injustices wrought by the Treaty of Versailles. The legacy of the trenches thus extended beyond the immediate aftermath, contributing to a climate of political extremism that would plunge the world once more into darkness. In reflecting upon the suffering endured by soldiers in the trenches, we confront not just a chapter of military history, but a poignant reminder of the war's profound inhumanity. This key event, this perspective on the abject horror faced by countless individuals, crystallizes why World War I is indeed viewed as a horrific culprit against future civilization, a stark warning of the depths to which humanity can descend when the drums of war drown out the voices of reason and compassion. As we journey through the shadowed corridors of history, revisiting the harrowing saga of World War I, we emerge with a profound understanding of its disastrous impact on the world. This conflict, unlike any before, unleashed the full might of industrialized warfare, leaving in its wake a landscape scarred by destruction and loss. The tales of mechanized death, the gas-choked battlefields of the Western Front, and the haunting silence of the trenches serve as grim reminders of humanity's capacity for devastation. The Great War, as it was once known, marked the end of old worlds and the painful birth of new ones. It was a crucible of fire that reshaped nations, redrew borders, and altered the very fabric of societies. We've witnessed the poignant narrative of the lost generation, young lives consumed by the flames of conflict and the deep scars, both visible and invisible, that the survivors carried with them. This war was not just a series of battles. It was a seismic event that upended millions of lives, catalyzing profound changes in social norms, cultural expressions, and gender roles. Yet, from the ashes of despair, we also draw lessons of strength and the resilient spirit of humanity. The aftermath of the war, while fraught with political turmoil and the seeds of future conflicts, also sparked movements towards self-determination, women's suffrage, and a collective yearning for peace that led to the formation of the League of Nations. Despite its flaws and eventual failure, this endeavor was a testament to the hope that such a fiasco could be prevented from ever recurring. In reflecting on the undeniable impact of World War I, we are reminded of the preciousness of peace and the perils of unchecked nationalism and militarism. This moment in history serves not just as a testament to the tragedies of the past, but as a clarion call for future generations. It beckons us to remember, to learn, and to strive for a world where dialogue triumphs over division, where understanding supersedes conflict, and where the specter of war is banished by the collective will for harmony. As we stand on the shoulders of history, let us carry forward the lessons of World War I with a renewed sense of purpose. Let us honor the memory of those who suffered by dedicating ourselves to building bridges of cooperation and peace. Together, inspired by the past, we can forge a future where civilization thrives on the principles of compassion, justice, and shared prosperity. The story of World War I, with all its despair and destruction, ultimately reinforces our belief in the possibility of a better world, a world worthy of the sacrifices of those who came before us.
In the trail of history's most tumultuous storm, your voice matters. Share your reflections, insights, and the stories of World War I that resonate with you. Together, let's keep this memory alive, exploring the depths of history's greatest lessons and its most painful tales. Our journey through time is far from over. Subscribe now, join our community of history enthusiasts, and be part of the ongoing quest for knowledge and understanding. Your engagement breathes life into our shared past, illuminating the path toward a future rich with the wisdom of history. Subscribe, explore, and let's continue this epic journey together. Peace.